Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder on this brilliantly sunny January 25th, 23rd. My name is Peter Rousmaniere. I'm very pleased to be your worship leader for today's service. We'll welcome all to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. All of you are welcome, and all of you are sacred. Whatever your past life was like, whatever this present moment is like for you, we invite you to journey into the future together. Welcome all of you who are joining us, in fact, all of us on the internet this morning. And you know the chat box is open if you want to get a message to us.
Let me just switch it back to my.
Yeah, at least.
Have people been hearing me? I think so. Okay, good.
Back up a paragraph, Peter.
Okay, good. Well, welcome. I won't repeat if I was muted, and I'm back now. Welcome all of you, and I pass the baton over to Reverend David.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here with everyone this morning. It's good to be with you. There's a change, a couple of changes in our order of service today. Deborah, our music director, is homesick, so we'll miss her singing today, but we'll hear a little bit of music from Christopher Watkins Lamb, who's just up the road and who was our intern here a few years ago, and a little bit of music from Ben as well, playing from home. I'm also under the weather, so I'm joining you from home, and I'm glad to be able to welcome as a guest preacher this morning the Reverend Sally Fritsch, who serves the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign in Illinois. Today, this afternoon, we kick off a new series of Sunday gatherings. From 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock every Sunday, from now through Easter, staff are going to host outdoor gatherings at the church. It's a way to get together to see each other outside, still masked during the cold months. We have all sorts of gatherings. There are sing-alongs that Deborah's going to lead. There are s'mores around the campfire that I am particularly looking forward to. There's some cleanup days around the church. And today, Reverend Dana hosts a conversation on the ongoing work of anti-racism. So no sign-up needed, just drop by at 2 o'clock outside for community and conversation. Today is nearly 49 years to the day since Roe versus Wade was decided, giving the legal right to abortion, giving the autonomy for a woman to decide what to do with her own body. And in those 49 years, never has that right been more fragile or under sharper attack than it is today. We affirm our historic commitment as Unitarian Universalists to the right to choose, going back all the way to 1963, years before Roe v. Wade, and only a few years after we became the Unitarian Universalist Association. We affirmed as a body, repeated in the decades since, that abortion can be a complex decision and a difficult decision sometimes, and nonetheless, not a decision for you or me or the state to make on behalf of someone else. All of us love someone who's had an abortion, whether we may know it or not. Every one of us. You may not know it, but it's true. But let's build on that and open the service today with these words from the Reverend Greta Jo Seidel, who many of you know when she was a member here years ago. She writes this: everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. And let's talk about the flip side. If you've had an abortion, you are loved. And if you've never told a soul, or if you share your story regularly, you are loved. If you are confident in that decision or wonder if it was the right choice, you are loved. And if you are queer, non-binary, trans, two-spirit, or a cis woman, you are loved. Friends, if you are child-free by choice, or if you want to have kids eventually, you're loved. And if your choice was driven by medical viability or your own emotional health, you are loved. If you found a provider to care for you, or if you had to rely on yourself, you are loved. And if you were always pro-choice, or if your choice conflicts with your beliefs, you're still loved. And if you love your body, or if you're still angry with your body, you're loved. And if you believe God loves you, or if you believe in nothing divine at all, nonetheless, you are loved. And if you find yourself reflected here, or if your truth is more than words and ink and my voice can say, you are loved. We'll open with this music from Christopher Watkins Lamb.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How deeply you're connected, how deeply you're connected, how deeply you're connected to my soul.
If you are joining us online, as you all are, excuse me, do you have a candle nearby to light? Ready to light. You chat box. Your chalice is lit. The neighborhood. What city? If you're joining us, welcome again. I'd like to invite this morning's chalice.
Good morning. My name is Robin Miller. I've been a member at UUCB for about 6 years now, and I am going to light the chalice. When I was first asked to do it, I had all sorts of ideas. I thought, I had just finished reading See No Stranger by Valerie Kaur, and I wanted to do something from there. And then I was listening to Tara Brach, and I thought, I'm going to include that as well. And so I had all these ideas, and I went back and forth and back and forth. But then I took a online training for our covenant groups for Soul Matters, and I looked at the Soul Matters packet for January, which is called Living with Intention. This is actually a plug for small groups and covenant groups. So if you want to join a group, you should do it because you're going to get so much out of it. But anyway, I looked at the covenant group, the packet, and I just felt that this really spoke to me. And so I'm going to read from the first page called Living with Intention. There's a quote from Katie Covey, the Soul Matters director. And she says, "Here's what I discovered. Intention is different from setting goals or resolutions in that it pulls us into who we truly are. Goals and resolutions push us out into future possibilities. To set intentions, we must listen to our inner voice, which tells us who we truly are. So here we are again in the month of January, with its talk of daring resolutions and demanding calls to become better. It's hard to resist. After all, who of us couldn't benefit from a bit of self-improvement? And so most of us gladly go along and declare, this is the year I'm finally going to be a better me. But are we sure this is what we really want? When you read that quote above about being pulled in rather than pushed out, what happens in your heart? Is being pushed really what you want and need? Are you really excited about the New Year's work of striving to create a brand new you? Or do you suddenly notice an internal whisper that says, I long to be pulled in more deeply to the self I already am? In other words, maybe our New Year's work is not about pushing forward into self-improvement, but about pausing, stepping back, and asking, what hunger has my heart? There is, after all, a big difference between becoming better and becoming ourselves. Self-improvement is not the same as self-alignment. Wanting to get from point A to point B is something quite different from longing to find your inner anchor. Bottom line, goals and intentions may indeed be more distinct than we have thought, and being clear about that may be more important than what we have thought. So this month, maybe our most meaningful work is to make room. All around us this month, there's going to be tons of talk about creating goals and imagining who we might become. But living with intention seems to be more about creating a quiet space that allows us to connect with who we already are, a space that protects us from the pressure to accomplish and instead makes room to ask questions of integrity. And if we are able to carve out that quieter space, then maybe we will discover that this isn't the year of finally becoming a better me. Maybe we'll decide it's enough to simply finally be me. I like this chalice for deciding it's enough to simply finally be me.
Our reading this morning is by Allison Cole, and it's called I Found God at the Abortion Clinic. Now, you know, longtime members and newcomers, that in this congregation, we have all sorts of theologies. So when I bring a reading to you that's called I Found God at the Abortion Clinic, it's not because this is all of our work too. It's not because this is the right way to do your spiritual life or the only way to do it. But if we listen to this, it's not an invitation to a theological argument, but a window into someone's experience, which may or may not resonate with yours. Honest and raw and complex and deeply human. This by Allison Cole, called I Found God at the Abortion Clinic. She writes, I didn't go there to get an abortion. I went there to be a professional feminist, a long-held career goal that still inspires my work today. I answered the phone, called the insurance companies, drew up the meds, checked in the patients, did pre-op counseling and informed consent, assisted the doc with procedures, held women's hands, cleaned up puke, washed and sterilized surgical instruments. It was the best job I've ever had. My ability to love the women that came to our clinic was transformative for them, because they often weren't feeling the love of partners, family, friends, church, or the culture at large. Often, they were hating hard on themselves. At the clinic, my capacity to meet those women with love was life-changing for them, and ultimately for me as well. And she continues, when I started working at the clinic, I had only a fledgling relationship with God that I'm not sure I could have articulated exactly what I believed in then, and I didn't really want to. The majority of my friends were atheist or agnostic. They did not want to hear about my personal experience of being enveloped by a love that I had come to identify as the divine presence. I didn't need to talk about it. It filled a need in me that had been there ever since I realized I wasn't a Christian at the age of 14, and that was enough. My friends didn't need me to evangelize to them. But our patients did. They came in terrified of hell, damnation, eternal separation from God. The Catholic protesters outside told them they would go to hell. Their parents, partners, friends, and Fox News told them they would go to hell by choosing not to carry and give birth to unwanted children. So many of our patients thought they had lost God forever, and in my heart, I knew that was wrong, so I had to speak. Doesn't matter what I believe, I told them. It matters what you believe. But I'm going to tell you what I believe. I was raised Christian, she says. I was raised that way, and what stuck with me the most from my Christian upbringing is this: God is love. Like the best parent ever, think about how much you love your kids, how they can do anything, and you still love them. Now think about me. I'm just a flawed human being, but I hear your story and feel compassion and understanding. How can we possibly imagine that God has less love and compassion and understanding than you and I? How can the Holy, who knows your heart, not understand the good reasons you have for making this choice today? She would say, I believe that God loves you today and always. Have you talked with your higher power about your choice? Do you think God understands? Do you think God loves you? I do. She says it was a relief for them to hear that someone could even hold an alternative vision of God, a God who could be with them through the abortion and after, who would love them no matter what. Well, that was the God I knew. It's the God I know, and I feel privileged to have been able to share that vision of a loving God with women who so desperately needed that love. And I'm so grateful that they did, because if I had not been forced to speak about what I believe, I may never have really understood the beauty and the power of that love.
We now invite all those gathered wherever you are to join together in fellowship and community as we say aloud together our congregation's covenant. We gather in fellowship to speak truth to each other, to reach out
And touch one another.
and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it.
Friends, will you take a breath with me? And another. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh died this week. He said, among a great many other things, that we have a tendency as people, as human beings, we have a habit to think in terms of doing and not in terms of being. We think that when we're not doing anything, we're wasting our time. But that's not true. And I think of that when I invite you to pause and take a breath together. He says, our time is first of all for us to be. To be what? To be alive, to be peaceful, to be joyful, to be loving. And this is what the world needs the most. We all need to train ourselves in our way of being. And that's the ground for all action. Our quality of being determines our quality of doing. And in that spirit, I invite you to be here now, to breathe deep, and to share 7 breaths together in complete silence. We'll be together in silence. Sometimes that shared silence feels agonizingly long, to sit quietly and let the mud settle in the turbulent ponds of our own brains. And sometimes that shared silence is the blink of an eye, a breath of relief and release and regrounding that passes in an instant. Gathering each week for services, whether it's across a Zoom screen or in person, we all of us gather to practice. In part to practice listening to our deepest selves and to that voice or source that's beyond us, however we understand it. In this moment in the service, this time of prayer and meditation each week, we practice stilling ourselves, resting ourselves, letting the chaos of our lives swirl and then settle. That's each of our work that we do together, to re-ground ourselves in who we are and what we're about. The joy and the sadness of each moment. Each week in the service, when we come together, we commit ourselves not to going through life alone, not to being hermits or monastics, but instead to trust our lives into each other's hands, to not carry all those worries and all those hopes either by ourselves, but to open them out into community, even if nothing comes of it besides naming it and knowing that we're not alone. Even if in this moment in the service, you don't say aloud, you don't put into the chat a joy or a sorrow, it's practice all the same, holding each other's lives and letting ourselves be held. And so as the music begins in just a moment and Ben leads us in, I'll invite you to type into the chat a joy or a sorrow, a hope or a worry. And in that way, to hold this compassionate space and to bless each other. Friends, thanks for all the ways that you bless each other. I'm thinking, seeing the joys and the sorrows move past in the chat box of William Blake, who says, "Joy and woe are woven fine." And he doesn't mean that it's well crafted. He means joy and woe are woven together with such a fine thread that you can't touch one but touch the others. That when you run your finger over a piece of finished work sewn, it's hard to tell where any of them stop and the others end. And I feel that this morning, seeing the complex hope and grief of the congregation. Friends, thank you for the ways that you bless each other. Our preacher this morning, I am delighted to welcome a guest. This morning, the Reverend Sally Fritsch, who serves at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign in Illinois, is going to join us. Our congregation joins, I think, nearly 200 other Unitarian Universalist congregations this morning in leading a service and preaching and thinking together about abortion and abortion rights. And Reverend Fritsch asked for stories and questions from her congregation and heard so many, weaving them together into a reflection which isn't unique to Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, but is the story of abortion rights and access around the country. The first 15 or so seconds, her video is frozen, but not to worry, it will pick up in just a moment.
Thank you to everyone who shared their stories with me in the weeks leading up to this service. I opened up my inbox and invited you to speak openly about your experiences under the safety of, and the response was overwhelming. I had at first thought of including every word of your stories in this service, but I realized that would fill almost our entire hour this morning. So let me provide just a few snippets, a small window into the ways abortion access has touched lives right here in our congregation. One UUCUC member writes, "I was in my late 20s, married for 7 years, financially stable, planned pregnancy, announced the pregnancy early and celebrated like we won the Super Bowl, had picked out a name years earlier, and then we got the news. There was something wrong with the baby." From another UUCUC member writing of life in pre-Roe America. "After arriving back at her apartment in Iowa, my sister began hemorrhaging. Her boyfriend took her to the hospital where she was treated, and thank goodness she was one of the lucky ones who survived. My sister was expelled from her college. Police came to her apartment and searched for abortion-related drugs prescribed by the doctor in Chicago, which were found. We believe that the doctor was arrested and punished, but don't know for sure." From a UUCUC member who worked at a Planned Parenthood for many years. "One case I remember in particular was a young woman who was married and had 3 or 4 children at home. She was pregnant again and said she just could not have another child. She was crying, feeling very sad about the decision, but also knew it was the right thing for her family and for herself." Another story from a UUCUC member's life. "My obstetrician scheduled an ultrasound for the beginning of my 3rd trimester. We had avoided most prenatal tests because of the small threat they posed to the fetus. A friend agreed to watch our toddler during my appointment, telling me cheerfully, 'See some beautiful pictures.' As the doctor studied the screen, he became quiet, with a concerned expression. I looked and remarked that the baby looked different. He replied, 'I see something terrible. Our daughter had such severe birth defects that she would die within seconds of birth, and there was no way she could live.' My obstetrician referred me to a private clinic run by a doctor infamous in right-to-life circles for performing abortions in every trimester. I found him to be compassionate. This period of my life taught me much about empathy, about cherishing people we love and the blessings we have because we don't know what lies ahead, about accepting the lessons life offers us, which might not be the ones we want. I don't dwell on the past, but the anti-abortion comments and restrictions demand that we tell another side to the story and that we act to preserve the freedom won by the preceding generations of women. From another UUCUC member, I don't have any regrets. I was in no position to raise another child. It would have brought all of us down and would have trapped me in a failing marriage. It would have taken away from my ability to parent the children I already had, and my obligation was to them. Another writes, my abortion experience made me grateful. Grateful to my partner who supported me and didn't get mad that I'd stopped taking birth control because I was certain I was in perimenopause. Grateful for my children who I love so much and who I want to give so much of myself to. Grateful for Planned Parenthood less than 5 miles from my house, when my doctor at Carl said in hushed tones during a phone consultation that Carl doesn't do elective abortion. Grateful there were no protesters outside the clinic. Grateful for the woman behind the front desk who checked me into my appointment. I know she grew up in this church. I hope she did not recognize me. Grateful for the donors to the clinic and the many familiar names on the donor plaque, names of members of this congregation who, despite not knowing I was there that day last spring, supported my right to make that difficult decision. Reading your names was like getting a big hug. I feel grateful for the ability to make the decision that was right for me. And finally this, I am now a woman who has had an abortion. I'm at peace with the decision, but still fear rejection and judgment should I be public about it. I can count on one hand the people who know this about me. Thank you again to everyone who wrote to me or spoke with me about your experience. Your stories are unique and precious, and I am honored to be able to share some part of them today. This topic, abortion, is not abstract or distant. These are members of our community. Someone you love has had an abortion. Someone you love will need an abortion in the future. Of women currently of childbearing age in America, 35% will have an abortion before they turn 45. 35%, that's 1 in 3. And most people who have abortions are already parents. Most, more than 50%, already have children. Do you think people who speak about or pass laws about abortion know those numbers or know these stories? How have we allowed the reality of pregnancy, of abortion, of reproductive health care as a whole to be so obscured in these grand debates over legality and morality and politics? These are not abstract questions. These are the bodies, the health, the lives of people we know, people we love and rely on, our siblings, our moms, ourselves. Someone we love will need an abortion one day, whether we know about it or not. And we can't afford to wait until it affects us personally to care what that experience will be like for them. Stigma smothers our ability to tell our stories, to be honest with each other. Fear of judgment or a discomfort with conflict and disagreement marks this topic as off limits, taboo in ways that even other controversial debates are not. Churches all across town have rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter signs. But will any of us put up banners declaring our churches proudly pro-choice? And I know that not everyone in this congregation is in complete agreement on the legality and morality of abortion. There are those who are concerned about the question of when exactly human life begins, those who can't help but view every ended pregnancy as a tragedy. I know of several here who feel abortion should only be a last resort, but who still strongly support pro-choice legislation, access to birth control, etc., because it's the most practical way to lower the abortion rate long term. Maybe you are one of these. Maybe you feel morally conflicted when it comes to abortion, or unsure of what you would do if faced with your own decision about pregnancy. Maybe you're still figuring out what exactly you feel at all, and that's perfectly okay. I hope that no matter your feelings or your beliefs, you're able to stay present in this conversation and listen. Listen with your whole mind and your whole heart to the experiences of those who have beliefs and feelings just as complex and varied as yours, but who have lived the embodied consequences of our political debates. And listen, too, for the voices of those who are trying to make it harder to access abortion. Those voices are very easy to find. They hold positions of power in state houses, in courts, and in church pulpits. Listen to how they talk about pregnant people and their role in the world. Listen to who gets their judgment and who gets their compassion. Listen to how they talk about children who are no longer in the womb and who need the care and support of a social safety net. Children at the border, children on food stamps, children who become pregnant themselves and need abortion care. I say to listen for those voices because those are the voices being heard by your loved one who's had an abortion. Those are the voices that play on the news or on the radio when your kids are in the car. Those are the voices our legislators and judges hear ringing out from their constituencies. Anti-abortion voices are loud, and they have monopolized the national conversation for too long, especially when it comes to religion. It's not incidental that this is a Sunday morning service rather than an evening lecture series or a quiet support group. I want to be entirely clear that for me, and for many UUs, being pro-choice is a moral, religious, faithful stance. And there's nothing shameful or inappropriate about the topic of reproductive justice. On the contrary, it's something sacred, worthy, and inherently connected to our principles and commitments as UUs. My faith compels me to be part of this conversation, part of this fight. In the decade before Roe v. Wade, a group of 21 American ministers and rabbis came together to do whatever they could to help women more safely access the abortions they needed. This group, called the Clergy Consultation Service, eventually grew to over 3,000 members, including many UUs, with chapters in 38 states. Their work was entirely illegal, and they operated in secrecy to find safe and qualified doctors, to ferry patients across state lines, to provide childcare and temporary housing to family members, and offer aftercare and financial support when possible. It was their faith, their moral convictions that led them to risk everything for the sake of the lives and human dignity of total strangers who needed them. Today, this work is carried on by the National Network of Abortion Funds. This national network brings together a patchwork of autonomous local nonprofits that provide practical support like transportation, childcare, lodging, translation services, and even access to doulas. I may dream of restarting the Clergy Consultation Service to help smuggle desperate people into Illinois for health care, but the truth is, we don't need to restart anything. Local and national abortion funds are already there on the ground, building those relationships and creating that communal strength. And people of faith are there with them, quietly living out their convictions and doing the work of justice. I am speaking about abortion from the pulpit this morning because I refuse to cede this conversation to those who preach so loudly against it. I refuse to let the simplified black and white picture of what it means to need an abortion or who it is that gets an abortion stand unchallenged. So I will be part of this conversation, publicly, proudly, for the sake of everyone whose story was told today, and for the sake of everyone whose story is still waiting to be spoken aloud. If you are listening today, no matter where your heart lands on this issue, if it's a good heart and committed to understanding and fully embracing your fellow humans and all their complexity, then I invite you to be part of this conversation too. We need to talk about abortion. Within our churches, with our friends, with our families. I know it's difficult, it's awkward, it's upsetting, it's private, but we need to talk, to listen, to ask each other questions and tell each other our stories. We need to talk about abortion. Because if the good-hearted people of the world stay silent, unsure, avoidant, we know exactly which voices will ring out all the louder, calling for more restrictions, less access, more judgment, and a return to the terror of pre-Roe America. So may we speak out, may we share deeply, and may we listen, always, to those whose stories tell the lived, visceral repercussions of our society's endlessly abstracted culture wars. These are our lives, so may we not be quiet about it. Amen.
This month, our offering goes to the Boulder Food Rescue. I have a few words here from Jennifer, who's a grocery program coordinator for Boulder Food Rescue, and it goes as follows. BFR has been serving our community at Palo Park since we opened in 2018. As soon as the residents started moving in, BFR graciously followed. BFR is unique in that they have adapted to the needs of their grocery recipients by bringing the food directly to those who need it. People receiving the food need only to walk to their community center to pick it up, as opposed to driving to a food bank where it is warehoused. This also allows it to be used faster, which is especially important for produce, meaning the system wastes less. COVID has brought many hardships, yet BFR has adapted to bringing more food as needed to our community, which has been especially important for those who were suddenly plummeted into the trials of unemployment or reduced work hours. BFR has taken care of our community when we needed it most. I invite you to give as generously as you are able. You can make a donation now using the link on your chat, or send a check to UCB, the address is on the chat, or scanning the QR code on the next slide with your mobile phone. Thank you very much.
Friends, our worship comes to an end and our service begins again. Go out into this bright day and be a blessing on the world. Will you join me in our congregational response to go your way in peace? And then I'll invite you to stay in the Zoom rooms afterwards for a time of online fellowship and discussion.
Thank you. Thank you all who have gathered here this morning, and there have been very many. We invite you now to stay with us on these clever little group chat meetings, and have a good morning and good sunny Sunday, January 23.